This video is about couching, which is a surface embroidery technique. This is used when you have a thicker thread or yarn, maybe even a ribbon, that you want to use in your project, but it's too thick to go through the fabric as regular embroidery stitches. So the most traditional version of couching is to lay down a thread. Here I've laid down pink pearl cotton, and then you go over it with a series of straight stitches, which I've done here in a green thread. And you can alter that a little bit. Here I've laid down 6 strands of embroidery floss all together. I haven't divided it. And then instead of doing a straight stitch, I've gone across at a diagonal with a bright pink thread. You can also use other embroidery stitches that you've already learned. So in this case, I've used another piece of pearl cotton, here in blue, and I've fastened it down with buttonhole stitch in a bright plum colored thread. You can also do thicker pieces. Here I have a piece of mini rickrack, and I've just fastened it down with a straight stitch at each point. Couching is a technique you'll see a lot in gold work, where the metal threads might actually be too delicate to pull through the fabric because it's metal wound around a cotton or silk core, and so pulling it through the fabric would actually destroy the thread. So here they're just laid on top of the surface of the fabric, and then little stitches are made in silk just gently across to hold that in place. Here I've used a matching colored silk because I wanted it to be invisible when you step back. There are also styles of gold work where you lay down your metal threads and then use various colors of silk or cotton to anchor them down. And by varying the distance between the colors and even which colors, you can create entire patterns on top of the gold with just those couched stitches. So let's talk about how to couch down a thread. Here I have 6 strands of DMC cotton floss. I have the line that I want to follow, and I've actually marked it off in even stitches. These are 1/8 of an inch apart. And because most of the time it's going to look neatest if you have your stitches evenly spaced, unless you're using them for a different effect. Like if you're using a contrasting color, you may want them to be closer together or further apart as part of your design. Now I've anchored the 2 ends of the DMC floss through the fabric with a wide-eyed needle and tacked them to the back. So this isn't actually coming out, it's not loose. It's just laid down lightly over the fabric and secured at each end so that we can work with it. I'm going to bring my needle up wherever I want that first point to be and go back down on the other side of that thread. And you'll just do that all the way along, just taking short stitches straight across and anchoring it down every so often. And like you saw in my other sample, if I wanted to, I could come up and go down at the next marking and start to angle those stitches instead. So you can play with this a little bit. Really, once you get the hang of how to couch things down and work them into your designs, you could couch down almost any thicker material, and you could use almost any embroidery stitch. So if you wanted to couch down a ribbon that was a little bit wider and use some of the other stitches, that would work. It's really just up to you and how you want to have this add to your design. You might also notice that when I angle these stitches, it looks a little bit like that technique where we did a back stitch and then wrapped a thread around it. Here you're just laying it down and angling the stitches rather than wrapping them around later. So it's 2 different stitches that give similar effects, and you might find places where one is easier or more desirable than the other. For this circular sampler, I used couching here in the center to make this circle. I had this tapestry cotton that was very thick and very loosely wound. It's not meant to be separated, but it's meant to be used with a fabric that has much bigger holes. And so I knew that pulling it through such a fine weave linen would actually shred it and get it looking pretty ragged. But I liked the color and I liked the texture, so I went ahead and couched it down so that I could add it to my project. If you want to add some couching to the alphabet sampler, I'd suggest a letter with fairly simple lines, perhaps the C or the I. If you did something with the H, it has these little bits that poke out at the top to form that serif shape, and that would be tricky to put down with a thicker thread and have it follow the curve. So doing something with a simpler shape is going to make it easier for you to follow the shape of the outline and still use one of those heavier threads being couched down.